Welcome back to the Legacy Radio Network. I'm your host, Dennis Tubbergen. You're listening to the Everything Financial Radio Show. We are very pleased and privileged to have as our guest today the very, very busy Representative Bill Huizenga. And Congressman, the Federal Reserve has certainly been making some headlines. Ben Bernanke has been out giving some speeches. I have called it his PR tour, but they've engaged in some quantitative easing over the past few years. And given that 5 of the world's largest central banks around the world have done the same, including the European Central Bank here since the end of the year, it seems that we're in a race to the bottom in terms of currency devaluation. I'd be very interested in your view of the Fed's policies and what your opinion is as to the end game.
Well, and frankly, the last part of your question is the key. What is the end game? And my fear is that the desired effect may be there or partially be there on the short term. I'm not sure it's going to be there on the long term. And when you've got a central bank being as aggressive as they are with our money supply, my greatest fear is huge inflation. And I've got a friend of mine who picked up an antique German Deutschmark, right, from the 1920s, and on it it's a 100 Deutschmark bill that's been restamped as a $1,000,000 Deutschmark bill, and that is we've seen it happen in places like Germany and Nicaragua and a number of other places where they've just basically inflated their way out. And that is, to me, a huge fear. And when we are sometimes our only customer when it comes time to sell those bonds, like we are with quantitative easing, we are creating an artificially low interest rate atmosphere. And at some point or another, in the not too distant future here, those interest rates are going to have to come back. So. I'm very cautious and not very optimistic that it's going to have the long-term effect that they are hoping for.
At a certain point, the bond markets will make you honest with your monetary policies.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And in fact, we had a hearing on the 27th with the head of the New York Fed today, and we were talking about that exact thing. And the markets are fair but not kind, all right, and they are going to, as you point out, one way or the other, they're going to exact a price, and we can't just keep building it on artificially low interest rates.
Well, I have to admit, since I live in your district, I'm a bit embarrassed to make this admission, particularly on the air, but as I was preparing to do this interview today, I read on your website that you're a co-sponsor of a bill that would require a balanced budget at the federal level.
Yep.
Well, my hat's off to you. I am very, very pleased to hear that. Could you discuss the bill, and if passed, how would it work? What's your proposal?
Yeah, well, and I actually helped form what is called the Balanced Budget Caucus. It's a group of us that got together when we first arrived in Washington. We had this debate back in 1995. It passed the House of Representatives, the idea of having a constitutional amendment to our federal constitution, much like we have in our state constitution back in Michigan, that would require us to operate within balanced budgets, and with an extreme of if another, heaven forbid, 9/11 type event happens, there's a safety valve. But short of that, we have to go in and spend no more than what we're taking in as revenues. That, to me, makes a whole lot of sense. Last fall, we actually had a vote on it, and unfortunately, it did not garner the 2/3 vote required to move on out of the House of Representatives. And there was actually 11 Democrats who were here in 1995 who voted for it in 1995, including Steny Hoyer, who is the number 2 Democrat behind Nancy Pelosi, and he did not vote for it this time. And I don't think you can make the argument that we're better off, that we're we're in a better situation than what we were in 1995.
Certainly.
So it is a little lost on me as to why people would not want to have something like this, because I think we've pretty clearly demonstrated we don't have the self-discipline without it, and we need to have something like that to really rein ourselves in.
So what's your opinion, Congressman, that we will ever see a balanced budget requirement at the federal level and actually see that become the law of the land? Is that is that a fairy tale, or is that likely in your opinion?
Well, I'm not sure that it's likely, but it certainly is not a fairy tale. It's a debate that we need to have, and we need to continue to push. And quite honestly, Dennis, I think some of this is generational. You've got a group of people here that have been a part of the problem of running up these massive debts. It's frankly been on both sides of the aisle, and now it's gotten kicked into overdrive in the last 4 years. But there's plenty of blame to go around. This newer crop of freshmen that have showed up are very, very serious about tackling these issues, and they're willing to pay a political price if it's the right thing to do. And are we being smart in how we are doing it, and is it going to be effective? So that's sort of a marker that's out there. But the American people have to get engaged. They have to demand this of their elected officials. They have to say, hey, wait a minute, this is not acceptable. This mountain of debt you guys are creating for our kids and grandkids. These are hardworking taxpayers that are having their dollars taken from them, and we have to be held accountable how we're using those dollars, and whether we're using them effectively and efficiently. I don't think you can make that argument.
Well said. A few weeks ago, Jim Babka, who you may or may not be familiar with, he's president of an organization called Downsize DC. He was on the show, and he announced that a bill that was really one of his organization's pet projects, titled "One Subject at a Time," that had promoted again by that organization, had been introduced by Congressman Tom Marino. Essentially, the bill, if passed, as I understand it, would require that Congress not combine topics in their bills, allowing each bill covering one topic to either to stand or fall on its own merits. Are you familiar with the bill, and do you have an opinion on it?
Yeah, actually, I am familiar with the bill, and look, this is how things have been done in the past. You lard these things up with all kinds of different issues, and okay, you don't like this part, but hey, we're going to put a sweetener in somehow or another, and I think we've got to be very careful about how we do that, because suddenly you're wandering down these rabbit trails that really are not the intent of what is happening, and if it's something that's germane, that may make some sense, but when so often we've all heard those examples where it's just a completely different direction than what the original intent of the bill is, and it doesn't make sense. It would be, I think, much better if we could have a system that was basically open and honest with the American people, transparent. What is this really about? Not all the the legal mumbo jumbo, not all the lawyer double talk, not all the Washingtonese that oftentimes has gone into these things. Let's have it straight up say what it's supposed to do and not supposed to do.
The Supreme Court, obviously there's a lot of headlines this week. Certainly, I'm sure it's what's being talked about probably most in Washington this week, is currently hearing the case regarding the constitutionality of Obamacare, to use that term. What's your opinion, Bill, as to how this plays out?
Well, that's a good question, and I went wandering past the Supreme Court yesterday and today just to kind of catch a sense of a little bit of the atmosphere and what's going on and the mood, and this is big. I mean, this is a major issue. This is the most time that has been committed to any subject by the Supreme Court since Miranda versus Arizona, going back into the 60s. So, as I look at it and as I understand our Constitution and law, I just simply don't understand how they could possibly rule that individual mandate as being constitutional. That is very hard for me to understand or swallow. And obviously, including our own Attorney General Bill Huizenga in Michigan, joined up with 26 other state generals, and that's exactly their position. So, we're going to see where the Supreme Court comes down. I'm not sure that it ends the debate, but it will definitely influence and affect what we are doing here in the coming months and years. Everybody is looking to try to read the tea leaves here. Almost every breath and sigh that's put out by any of the justices is trying to be interpreted, and I don't know. I think it's going to be a tight ruling either way.
Quickly, in the minute or minute and a half or so we have left, you'd mentioned that growing the economy was certainly a priority, and I certainly think that our listeners would agree with that. Can you give us the top one or two things that, in your view, the country should do from a policy perspective to make that happen?
Sure. Well, so often, tax policy is talked about, and that is extremely important. But I'm going to jump to something else first and then maybe come back to tax policy. It's the regulatory policy that we also have. It's creating that atmosphere, creating an atmosphere of green lights and yes, not red lights, and no way, we can't do that. And in fact, just this week we saw the EPA come out with another ruling that effectively kills any additional coal-fired power plant from being built in the United States right now. They're going to require carbon sequestration, or basically the capturing of all of the emissions. It's something that there is some doubt as to whether it can be done, or certainly on the scale that it would take. And it effectively ends our ability to use coal as the backbone of our power system. But that's the reality of where we are. We simply do not have the technology or the capacity to do it any other way. So, that regulatory environment is so important. And then you get to tax policy as well. Again, it's about creating an atmosphere that allows for success. And we all know that there's been this layer cake of loopholes and credits and all this other stuff that's been building up over the decades. And at some point here, we got to cut through that layer cake and really get down to the essence of it. My solution, I would love to see a flat tax. I think that both as a personal flat tax and a corporate flat tax, that to me makes a lot of sense. We do start heading in that direction with the proposed House budget. 10% individual and a 25%, and so 10 and 25% individual, and then 25% for corporate. And that's the type of thing that we need to do to make sure that we are hanging the open and for business sign out, not the sorry, go somewhere else sign.
Congressman, I know you had a very, very busy day. I appreciate you sneaking some time in to do an interview to the folks here in West Michigan and actually in Northern Ohio. So hope you have a productive rest of the day, and thanks for joining us.
You got it. Hey, thanks, Dennis. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. We will be back after these words. Stay with us.